I'm Trevor the Treasure Seeker, and today on my show you're in for a real treat. My friend Forrest, the Forrest firefighter, is going to share some things. Now, he's not per se a treasure seeker. He seeks to preserve treasure. Check it out.
I'm Forrest, the Forrest firefighter. And when I was in preschool, on the first day home from preschool, I said, "Mom, Dad, you named me after a bunch of trees." And my dad said that because he flew planes over forest fires and dropped stuff on them that would make the fires go out, that he grew to love the forest and the trees so much that he named me after the forest. So that was how I knew he loved me, which is really cool. And I grew to love the trees. The thing I like most about the trees is you can hang out with them all day and you don't have to talk to them at all if you don't want to. And so I grew to love to put out fires if I ever saw them in the forest. If I ever saw a little ember, I'd burn it out, I'd blow it out and stop it. And so when I grew up, I wanted to fly planes like my dad over the forest fires, but I kind of had a hard landing and they wouldn't let me fly after that. So I became a forest firefighter. And it was great. It is great because I get to do it all the time. We get to hike 20 miles out to get to the fire, and then once we're there, we fight the fire for 36 hours straight, and then we sleep for 4 hours, and then we fight the fire for 36 hours straight. Like I said, we get to do it all the time. There was this one time, this guy let his campfire get out of control. And so they called us up. They didn't have time for us to hike 20 miles. They said, "You've got to get in the helicopters." They sent us these helicopters. And we had to be up in the air 6 minutes after the fire boss got off of the fire phone. And so we flew over the forest fire. And there we saw it was getting really bad. It was taking over everything. And so they let us down and we were fighting the fire. But it was so bad, they called Donald Trump to see if they could borrow 2 of his helicopters. He had these big, huge helicopters, and so they did, and Donald was really nice, and he let them use the helicopters, which was really great, until they got over the fire, and then they realized that the fire was so hot, when they let the water out, it vaporized, and the rotors of the helicopters made the fire worse. It was bigger and hotter and faster, and it was coming after us. And so we started to run away. We tried to get it down, but we couldn't, and so we ran away from the fire. And as we ran, we saw it was going to catch us. So what each of us did is we cleared a little space. We got all of the brush and the bramble away, and then we dug a little hole for ourselves, and we laid down, and we covered ourselves with this tinfoil potato sack kind of a thing, and then we let the fire go over us. And it was so loud, it sounded like a train going over the top of us, and it was so hot, and it was so smoky. I was glad I didn't get smoked out, but eventually it died down, and I took off the tinfoil potato sack, and I looked up, and there were my friends popping up out of their little holes. It was like we were all coming back from the dead. They call that resurrection. And so we all started dancing and singing and shouting. It was so great until I realized that we were now inside of a huge ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames got higher. We didn't know what to do, so I called my dad. I was glad we had a satellite phone because we got really bad signal out there. And so he came and he dumped the fire retardant on the fire, and we had a path that we could get out. But when he went to drop his second load of the fire retardant, the flames went way up over the top of the plane, and they had to go right through the middle of the fire. And the fire was so hot it had its own weather condition, and it was sucking things up, the branches and stuff, and it was hitting the plane. It sounded like a machine gun was hitting it, he said. And so then he came through the fire. Resurrection. It was like he came back from the dead too. And so then, because right at that moment he flew through the fire, he let out all of the rest of his fire retardant and he put it out. We had to clean up the last patches of it, and then we had to walk home 20 miles because it was no hurry to fly us back home. and we were walking through all of this burned out forest, and it was horrible. In some sections, there wasn't anything at all left on the ground. And my dad said that when he first started dropping fire retardant, they used this thing called borate. It was white, and it would cover the ground, but they found out that nothing would grow back. It couldn't resurrect. So my dad helped them experiment, and they used water, but that didn't work because it would evaporate before it got there, and it would make the fire worse, as we knew. And so then they tried seaweed, but that didn't work very well either, and it was really stinky. So then they used this clay called bentite, and it was orange and looked cool, and it worked really well, and they mixed it with fertilizer so that after the fire was gone, resurrection! All of the plant life came back, and it was just like new. And when I went to visit that place where I'd buried myself, there were flowers.
Resurrection! That is what Easter is all about. You can have your chocolate Easter eggs and your Easter egg hunts and all of that. That's all good fun. But what Easter is really all about is how Jesus Christ, after he was crucified, went through the most painful death a man could imagine. He comes dancing out of the grave to cover all that we've ever done wrong so that we can live eternally with him. That is the greatest treasure ever.